So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about digital storytelling for brands. And you see, they made me put in the big case D in my job. That's their format, so that's why I've learned to be a little less picky. But I am Director of Digital and Social Strategy at Waggener Edstrom, which is a global communications firm. So basically what digital social strategy means is that, I help brands try to figure out how in this media fragmented world they get the word out about their brand and they get people really engaged with their brand and becoming advocates for their brand and helping to spread the word about their brands. So getting people on board, and we've worked with brands big and small. We've worked with entrepreneurial companies as well as major brands like Microsoft. So just want to tell you a little bit about me, because from the personal branding side of things, that's why Hodge and I have connected. I'm someone who has sort of built a personal brand. I, many years ago, used to work at a website called blackplanet.com. Anyone ever heard of it? Yeah. Okay, so like late 90s, early 2000s, I was like one of what they call an early social media manager, early community manager, right? They weren't even calling it that then, right? It was just, you were just doing content, right? And so I worked for the tech channel on blackplanet.com, and we had a sponsor. And what I had to do is I had to figure out how to create content that would get people inspired and talking about it, but then also how to get the sponsor's message in there, without coming off too advertorial-like, right? To sound authentic and original. And so I was doing that stuff, and then that was during the Web 1.0 days, where we had that big boom, big crash, and I got laid off, like many people did. There's another person. I got laid off like many people did back then, and I saw this blogging thing happening, around that time. It was just starting to take off, late 90s, early 2000s. And I said, you know what? I need to put my stake in the ground. I need to make a name for myself on the web. I need to build my brand. And so I created a website, and that's something I started to do. And ever since then, almost every job I've ever gotten has been because of my website and what I do on nowadays Twitter, right? Or other social media channels. So after that, I went on to work for Vibe and Spin magazines, heading their digital operations. I also worked for Fast Company. I don't know if you're familiar with that magazine. I helped them build a community on their website back in 2007. We did a full-fledged community-oriented website, and I was overseeing content and community functionality. So that's a little bit about my background, and after that, going to advertising agencies and communications agencies and working for myself, which Mario was so inspirational, I might go back to working for myself again. Did everybody hear Mario speak? Yes, he was very inspiring, because what happened to me before working for Wagner, I had reached that low. And instead of keep going, I went the other way. So Mario had a good message there that I'm taking in. So anyway, what I came to talk to you about is how storytelling is the way to get your message heard. Storytelling has existed since the beginning of time, right? And this is a good story. I use this as an example of a good story because it's the highest grossing animated film ever, right? All three films together have grossed over $1 billion. It's a kind of story that is connected with kids and their parents, but as well with people who are into animation or just regular folks who are kind of geeky, right? People who don't even have kids. It's just that good of a story. And although these are animated characters, we can connect with these storylines, right? In the first story, Woody's jealous of Buzz because, Andy brings home a new toy. We've all worked somewhere. When the new people come in, we're always concerned about what's going to happen to our job, right? We've been in that situation. Or if in your family, if you're an older sibling, when the new kid comes along, we know that story. And I think the third story is probably the best story. Like by accident, the toys get dropped off at this like terrible daycare center, right? Where these other like old, dilapidated toys kind of try to run them over, right? And it's a great story, and we get into that story. We feel it, right? And, you know, whereas ads, we see and hear ads, sometimes, you know, they look great. Sometimes they feel good. But without a story, with just like product placement, we're not connecting with them. And that's why I'm telling you, storytelling is the way to go. If you're an entrepreneur, if you work for a large company, the best way to talk about your brand is to build a story for your brand. Like I said, stories have been around since the beginning of time, whether you believe in the caveman or you believe in Jesus Christ, right? Jesus Christ told stories to relay his message to his followers, right? You know, and the caveman told stories, you know, about like, Ooga Mooga, I found fire today, you know, whatever it was, right? So stories have always been around, and they've always made ideas relatable. Stories also tend to inspire and motivate us. Like, again, I have to use Mario as an example. His story was really inspiring and motivational. So the elements of a good story, we all know them from childhood, and it's kind of easy. I don't know if you've ever seen the story arc before, but it's a basic story arc, and sometimes they show it in a linear progression, other times they show it with this building arc, and every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And somewhere in there, there's some conflict to be resolved, some tension, some resolution. So all good stories have structure, which is this narrative arc. They also have a theme, they have a plot, they have characters, they have a protagonist and antagonist, protagonist being, you know, the hero, the antagonist being either a situation or a person trying to stop the hero from you know, getting through his journey or his challenge, right? So I think, you know, like I said, we all know this format, because if you think about it from, and I just like to point to, does this have a, no, it doesn't have it. So like opening scene, I think of a story from childhood, Little Red Riding Hood, right? When we're introduced to Little Red Riding Hood, her mother's preparing a basket and says, I want you to take this basket of goodies to your grandmother's house, right? So she's on her way and she's going through the woods and she runs into this wolf, right? Somewhere in the middle, she runs into this wolf. Somewhere where this crisis happens. But she doesn't realize it's a crisis because when the wolf asks her, oh, where are you on your way to, little girl? She says, to grandma's house, right? She just gives away the information, right? Little unbeknownst to her, the wolf wants to eat her, right? So the wolf goes over to grandma's house and the wolf locks grandma in the closet, gets dressed up in grandma's clothes, lays in grandma's bed. When Little Red Riding Hood comes in, she's like, oh, grandma, what big teeth you have. And you guys know the rest of the story, right? So when the wolf gets ready to pounce on her and jump her, she screams, yells out a big scream, and the woodsmen come. That's the climax where she yells out the big scream, and then the woodsmen come, and the wolf runs away, and then she and her grandmother reunite, and they're overjoyed and all of this, right? So how does this work for a business? For a brand to make a good story, first a brand has to have a promise. A brand has to know why it exists. What is your brand promise? What does your brand stand for? Right? And then your brand reputation is how others see you, how your partners, your consumers, other potential audiences. I think of a company like Nike when I think about good brand storytelling, just in general brand storytelling. Nike, once upon a time, always a great brand. It's the kind of brand that makes everyone feel like they can be an athlete, right? Everyone loves Nike. Then one day we find out Nike is hiring child workers in third world countries. And we hear their deplorable conditions, working conditions. And we lose faith in Nike, and that changes the brand reputation. But Nike finds a way to win its way back by telling good stories, by cleaning up the mess they've made, by doing things like building playgrounds from recycled materials, right? They start giving back to the community. Earlier, if you saw that talk talking about transformation, she was talking about brand transformation, and that's exactly what Nike did, right? But they told the story. They had a narrative arc to the story. They made it about the company, not just about a product, right? They told that story cross-channel. What does that mean? That means use all the media that's available to you. Whatever's available to you and wherever you know your audiences are going to be listening. And make sure you have an emotional connection. We've already talked about Toy Story, how Toy Story emotes. It makes you laugh. It makes you cry if you're a 5-year-old. It's just that kind of story that makes you feel good. Use rich media, especially nowadays. You want to be able to use video, apps, whatever you can afford. And all this stuff doesn't have to cost too much. Engagement. Make sure it is engaging. And mechanics. When I talk about mechanics, that's, again, making sure you use all the tools that are available to you. So when I think about, I was reading this book called Managing Content Marketing, and they took a play on what's a traditional thing from storytelling. Has anyone ever heard of the hero's journey in storytelling? Yeah. So Joseph Campbell, hero's journey. And it talks about the path that the hero follows. And every hero goes through this. Superman to, what's the dude in the Matrix? Neo, yes. To Neo, to even Nemo, right? Goes through this hero's journey. And that's the way you have to think about your brand and your business when you're developing your story. So you start with the conventional market. So that's your research. You're researching what's happening in your industry. What's happening amongst your competitors? What's really going on in the industry? And then the challenge is, what are you offering that's different or is helping to solve a problem, right? And how's that going to be received? So rejection of the challenge, appointment of the stage, crossing to the unfamiliar. How is this going to be received, this new thing that you're introducing, right? And who are the people that are going to align with you and accept you and help you tell this story? You have to find the right people. Some people call it influencers, right? So finding influencers in your category who can help you spread the word. So that's like if you're on Twitter and there's other people who do digital lifestyle expert or digital and social media. You reach out to those other people. You share your story with them. You get them to become advocates. But you don't just share stories, you also give them something. You give away something for free, you share knowledge, you share tips to cross into the unfamiliar. Map that road of challenges. Now that you know who your partners are, you know why you're different, you now have to talk about your differentiation. What makes you so different? Then there's the final challenge. The final challenge is like just laying it all down, making sure you have it all clear. You know your path forward. And then you look back and you assess everything you went through so you get to the final renewal. And there's never a final renewal because you're always introducing an iteration of who you are as a personal brand or of what your products are, of what your company's position is in the marketplace. So it's never exactly final. But for each phase, for each element, you need to consider this when you're building your story. And while I talk about the hero's journey being your brand that I got from Managing Your Content Marketing book, I also think it's really important to understand who your real hero is in your story. Putting people at the center of your story helps your story go a lot further. It makes it more relatable. I think, back to Mario again, Mario said something to the effect of, it's not all about you, right? So it's not all about you. It's not all about your brand. It's how you share your brand with others. How can you put other people in there? So what is your brand narrative? Your brand narrative Your brand narrative is the narrative about who you are as a brand or who your company is. It's the themes that represent your brand. So I do digital and social media strategy. But I also speak a lot about augmented reality. So augmented reality is one of my themes, right? So it becomes part of my brand narrative. So then I start building my content around my augmented reality story. So for instance, I want to write a book about augmented reality. I didn't know any literary agents. So what I did was I started telling my story about augmented reality. And what I did was I went to every conference I could possibly go to and just started talking about augmented reality, why I thought it was so cool. Not just cool, but why I thought it could result in ROI for marketers. Why marketers could use augmented reality to help gamify whatever they were doing or to help enhance the experience that customers were having with their brands. And so I went to Web 2.0 and I went to South by Southwest and I reached out to other people in the augmented reality community and I let everybody know what I was trying to do until someone went and they said, I know this woman, Lynne Johnson. She's been speaking about augmented reality. They told this agent, I think you should meet her. I know you're looking for a book on augmented reality. And there you go. I built the story. I kept it going. I had a beginning, a middle, and I didn't know my end yet. And I still don't know the end. But I have an agent, and I'm working toward that. So as you're building your pieces of content, figure out influencers and users, other users, who you can get involved in helping you build out your content and share your story. One of the times I spoke at South by Southwest, I had someone else who was known in augmented reality partner with me on making the presentation, right? So that's just like when I talked about the hero's arc with your brand. Getting across, crossing between that known and unknown, you have to find out who your partners are. So, how do we do it? How do we do good digital storytelling? First, there's the research phase. Is understanding your audience. Knowing who the people you want to reach are, knowing what they're interested in, knowing where they hang out. So that means using tools like, if you're on Twitter, using Hootsuite, right? To kind of get analytics on who's following your links. Use your Google Analytics to see who's visiting your website, where they're coming from. Is Twitter directing people more to certain types of content over Facebook, so that you know what kind of messages you're putting in which places. Know what your brand means. I'm going to keep reiterating this. It's the same thing as understanding the why. You must know what your brand stands for, what your brand's purpose is, and never go off track. Keep it consistent across your media channels, your brand story. Create a story that connects, that's compelling. So when I talked about it being about the company and not just a product, you yourself as an entrepreneur, you've had some battles that you had to go through to get there. Let people know about that. Miss Rohr, what was her first name again? I'm sorry, from Defy Ventures, right. She stood up here and she talked about, she was very transparent about what happened to her in Texas. Sometimes you have to be willing to share your failures, right? To move the story ahead, to endear people to you. Listen and engage. Listen and engage. That also means using analytics tools to listen to where people are talking about you. Tracking with Google Alerts, tracking on Hootsuite, tracking on whatever social media tool you use. And learn. You learn each time. You end up having to reiterate often. Mario talked about failing fast and reiterating. You often have to do this. And once you get all of that research and you move through the paces, you need to make sure you're telling a story that's relevant, relatable, and repeatable. It has to be a story that other people will want to share. Right? Word of mouth is the biggest thing. Now, I don't know if I have audio here. But if we don't, I'll explain it to you after, as it plays. Okay, so I'm showing you some ways that some big brands did it, tell the story. Coca-Cola's promise is happiness, right? Coca-Cola is all about making you happy, making you have a smile. What Coca-Cola did is they did a little research. They wanted to reach younger consumers, and they did a little research, and they found out younger consumers use mobile apps and use Facebook, right? So they put this, they went into a college, St. John's University out here in Long Island, and they put in this machine, and the idea was to give people back something more than just a Coke, right? To surprise and delight them. And they put this video up, and within a couple of days, 1 million people saw this story and shared it, right? Because it just made people feel that good. It was funny, it's endearing, it made people, it really represented happiness. So much so that after they did a study with a research group, they figured out how to cut the video down and make it good for television as well, right? To make it a real ad for them. And what they did was they focused on storytelling. They focused on their brand promise and what people have come to expect from them. And so that was the Coca-Cola happiness machine. I think that's a big example, but you can do stuff that's small. Here's another thing. We all familiar with this? The Red Bull Stratos landing? Another huge, big, major event. But again, it was a story. It was a compelling story. The beginning of the story is we're going to have this guy, drop from outer space, the free fall, more, I'm getting ready to say miles, altitude than anyone else has ever fallen from. And, this one post on Facebook for his landing received such high engagement. I've never even seen a number like this before. 19,300, or is that million, whatever, I can't even tell the way they wrote it. Because it's like 4 numbers there, so it's 19 million, what? 19,003,557. Yeah, because there's no zeros there, I'm confused, sorry. And I was a math major in high school, so there you go. Yeah, it's a million. It's something, 19 million something. Right. Anyway, this made this guy a hero, celebrity. They found their hero. They created a story around the hero. They brought everyone in to share in the story with them. Come check us out on Facebook. Come check us out on YouTube. And they brought people into the story. So that's just like if you're doing a webinar, bring people into the story. Make it about them as well as about your brand. And the last one I want to go over with you is capture euphoria. Ben & Jerry's did a contest on Instagram asking people to show moments that were euphoric to them. And they received 17,000 entries before they closed the contest. And then they showed the folks on their Instagram channel as well. So they shared their story with other folks. What's your story? It's time to think about it. If you haven't thought about it before, it's time to think about it now. If you're building your brand, if you're building your company and your business, start thinking about what your story can be and all the creative ways that you can tell it. Thank you.